few weeks ago, I decided to get stuck into the Rogue Trader playtest to see what's what. I made a video about it, talked about what I liked, what I didn't, and it gave me a pretty solid idea of what to expect in the full release. But all of those opinions and expectations have been well and truly dismantled, because Owlcat were kind enough to provide me some more access, this time to the full game, the final finished product. So let's have a chat about how the full game stacks up to the pre-release content you've seen floating around, and what improvements there are to look forward to. As I said, I already made a video about the beta version. I'll be referring to it here and there, and if you want to watch it, there's a link on the screen right now. But to summarize, I thought it started out slow and lacked urgency. It was trying to force lore and backstory on me when all I wanted to do was play. There were jank, bugs, oddities, and whilst it was fun, it didn't live up to the expectations I'd built up in my head. But deep down, I believed it had the potential to be something quite special. I thought I'd have to go looking for worthwhile changes in this version, but they hit me immediately. I originally referred to the character creator as quote-unquote good enough, but it's seen some welcome improvements. First off, the character portraits. They are excellent. I want my Rogue Trader to look like one of these. But when I tried to replicate that in the beta, I ended up with a budget look-alike from Craigslist. Now when you select a portrait, your character matches them. From there you can tinker as you see fit. Apply some augmentations, get inked up, or give your character a gnarly set of scars. The models just look better now. I felt characters in the beta looked a little soft, but now I could see Baron von Whippleshot II in all his scarred and tattooed glory. There's also several different voice options. These all have a very different feel to them, and the quality across them is top notch.
Blood and mayhem shall be our anthem!
To arms!
In the playtest, there are a lot of options missing, but obviously now they're all here. These decisions will play a big part and can add some tools to your kit that will become essential to your gameplay, as well as a few dialogue choices here and there to heighten roleplay. The improvements kept coming. After character creation, I was greeted with a very nice surprise: voice-acted dialogue.
I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with you in person before.
The beta hits you with a pretty hefty reading list, and while that's still there, it being voice acted does get you invested much quicker. Now, before you get excited, not all the dialogue is voiced. Just important story moments here and there, and some key companion conversations. But it's enough to break things up, and when you hear the line spoken, you know it's time to perk up and pay full attention.
I cannot wait to rain righteous fire down upon each and every heretic!
My main criticism in the last video was that the start of the game didn't really have any momentum. In between the reading and the walking around, I didn't feel the impact of anything. There were action sequences that felt slow and clunky, set pieces felt forced, and it was all a bit of a slog. But that's all changed. In a lot of cases, set pieces have been altered and changed with various tweaks. They've made the camera feel more cinematic and decreased the time spent on individual actors completing their movements. In some cases, they just straight swapped out a section for something else, and the new versions just work better. Where once I crawled, this time I skipped through with ease, and it's such a welcome change. It also helps that the game now just looks a lot better. I originally thought it looked a little bit out of focus. Models and the world had a bit of a blur to them, and the lighting seemed a little off, but this is a step up. Models were crisper and clearer, particle effects were better, the lighting really highlighted the atmosphere and moodiness of the game's world. But the changes aren't just eye candy. A bunch of the game's systems have been refined. The leveling process and morality system have been streamlined, and it's easier to get a grasp of things at a glance. Tooltips are less wordy, yet they still gave me all the information I needed. This helped me get a grasp on what my plan was with my party. This time around, I decided to ditch the marksman class for my player character and instead become a leader, which is now called an officer. The change was mainly because the Sister of Battle provided enough firepower on her own, but also mainly because I think Cassia is weird and I wanted to oust her from my crew. I'm sorry to all you Cassia enjoyers out there, but I just don't really trust mind reading fish people. These small improvements were felt all the way through the first chapter. The increased pace and urgency made me want to travel off the beaten path to explore side content and extra planet missions. And these are a lot of fun. The game has these little self-contained stories that feed back into the main narrative, so it all feels worthwhile. And honestly, that narrative feels better with all these changes. Or maybe it isn't better. Maybe I was just more committed to seeing what was unfolding. When you take the voice acting, the better character models, improved effects, and newfound sense of urgency, and add it all to a big crucial fight, it just takes everything up a notch.
For I am Old Roadrunner.
When going through the beta, I stopped at the end of chapter 1 as it seemed like a sensible place to wrap up. I'd fought a big bad Chaos Marine, the system's story had come to its conclusion, and my rogue trader sought out an early retirement. What that made me miss out on is that the game really opens up in its second chapter. I started to feel like the powerful individual my title said I was, where previously I felt just like a guy who accidentally stumbled backwards into an open job position. You go from the immediate star system into a galaxy map of the expanse. You can chart a course through the void to reach unexplored sectors where you find events, curiosities, and planets ripe for a bit of exploiting or colonizing. With the resources you gather, you can fulfill trade contracts, making yourself even richer. I'm a fan of the game's economy system. You aren't collecting 1,000 swords to sell to a vendor for a coin apiece. In fact, there's no money in the game at all. You have a stat that basically says what you're good for, and you can trade with factions based on that metric. All the useless oddities you find on your travels can be packed up as cargo and given to factions to increase your standing with them. It's an out-of-the-box approach, but I really prefer it. No longer am I spending hours of my time organising my woefully cluttered inventory and selling it piece by piece to a vendor for a tuppence. Along my travels, I fought my first few space battles. Now these don't come as thick and fast as normal combat, so I wasn't able to form a full opinion, but it seems fun. There's usually multiple enemies and only one of you, so it can be hard to keep track of where your target is. But you've got some nifty tools to mess with, and you can station your companions at different parts of the ship to unlock bonuses and abilities. It's a lot simpler than ground combat, but enjoyable. I wouldn't want to do too much of it though, as I think it would get repetitive quickly, but the amount it was happening felt about right.
Macro cannons, open fire!
The game is much denser by this point, but I felt like it had led itself there at a pace that meant it wasn't overwhelming. The locations got more elaborate too. You'll find little events during your travels, and stories within stories within stories, and they're compact enough that I wanted to give them my full attention. They weren't dragging me away from my primary goal. During these excursions, your companions will weigh in and give their opinions. Now, I grew really attached to some of my characters before. My right-hand man, whom I'd known as Captain Chainsaw, continued to grow and thrive, evolving into Abelard, the man with a massive sword.
I took care of this one.
Argenta was still my bread and butter, deadening anyone who crossed her righteous path.
Escaped the Emperor's judgment.
But I started to get more options. A Xenos sniper who could tactfully control the battlefield with her rifle.
I am not your Xenos pet.
And Jay, who essentially did all the same things as my player character, but I kept her along just because she's sassy and fun. Sometimes your crew will weigh in on massive planet-altering decisions. Sometimes though, they'll just bicker amongst themselves to decide which one of them has to do some menial labour or go trudge through a sewer. When that happened, Cassia had managed to worm her way back onto my party, so I made her get off her high horse and stomp through some poo. Your party members are the backbone of the game, and they're all filled with personality and great quips and killer lines. Apart from Cassia, she sucks.
I'll show you why navigators are feared.
Owlcat are just good in the writing department. The dialogue is fantastic, the player options are varied and interesting, and all the people you surround yourself with feel human, even the aliens. But writing isn't the only thing Owlcat does well. I sang my praises for the combat in the beta, and I will do it again. It is excellent. It leans more into your XCOMs or your OG Fallout games than most CRPGs, but it's violent and bloody enough to make it still feel exciting. Everything has a low time to kill, so the tempo of battle is quick. A bit later on, you'll unlock subclasses to further specialize your teammates, and things get even more tactical. You can divide up the battlefield with your master tactician or pinpoint and eliminate key enemies with your assassin. There's also the momentum system, which grants special abilities that can turn the tide of a fight. And I thought this worked great. Some of these abilities were absolutely huge. Nothing felt better than watching Sister Argenta mow down an entire pack of enemies with one rapturous bolt gun volley. Or seeing Abelard just bonk everyone with his massive sword. So all in all, Owlcat have improved nearly every aspect of the game. I felt like the full release was just a different beast to what I'd played before, and while a lot of my previous worries were gone, a few new ones crept in. The obvious thing, bugs. There are bugs. Some of them are quite cute, like my important rogue trader chair just suddenly turning invisible. Others were not cute, like tooltips and combat information not showing up. I ran into an issue with an event not spawning, meaning I had to reload an earlier save and clear that whole area again. While the game's performance as a whole felt pretty tight, these issues did slow things down and led to reloads, crashes, and a fair bit of swearing on my part. Only a couple of crashes, I'll point out, but still, that's not a seamless experience. It's also worth mentioning, all of this is about areas that have received extensive playtesting and input from players. A lot of the later game just hasn't had that, so be prepared for even more bugs further into your journey. But those are all things I expect to be fixed pretty quickly. There are some problems I had that were more design issues that I think just worked against the player. They've done a lot of work clarifying and streamlining the game mechanics, but some are still confusing. Veil degradation is a really interesting mechanic, but it's difficult to tell what the actual impact is. You might get a small notification in the combat log, but it's lost among hundreds of other things. And sometimes the explanations are in Russian, which, that's not all that helpful to me. While character building felt better, there's still a crazy number of talents to pick from. I definitely made some blunders here and there, and as far as I could tell, I couldn't respec. This feels doubly bad when you're given a companion and they have all of their options already picked out for you. Although it may be the case where it is a system and I just haven't found it yet. In which case, just go ahead and ignore me and pretend I never said all that. Okay, let's wrap this up. Firstly, I do want to just thank everyone who left a comment with your thoughts on the last video. It helped me see what you guys are excited about / care about in Rogue Trader, and those opinions were invaluable in making this video. So please feel free to share them once again. I always read them all, even the mean ones. And before you write it, I was joking about Cassia. She's not that bad really. I'm glad I made her stomp through the poo sewer though. So Rogue Trader. In the beta, I felt the game had issues. The pacing was sluggish, the game focused too much on telling and not showing, and it bordered on monotonous here and there. I'm very happy to say that 90% of my issues and worries are gone. I had an absolute blast with the full version. It found its momentum quicker, it was smoother, it looked better, it was more cinematic. Everything just came together. Its weak spots, like its performance and pacing, have seen big improvements, and the good stuff, the writing, the combat, they've all been touched up to make them stand even taller. There's going to be a lot of expectation on its shoulders following the huge success of Baldur's Gate 3, and while I'm not gonna say this will appeal to all the same people, it's a really stellar CRPG. This is a very good time for the genre. Honestly, I'm so invested, and all I want to do is keep playing. I can only hope that the rest of the game lives up to what I've experienced so far. But if it does, well then this is going to be something really quite special, and probably the best Warhammer game in a long, long time.